Welcome to the Journey of Legends, a series of conversations with legendary global leaders who changed the world with their thoughts, words, and actions. They kind of made a dent in the universe. In my previous conversation with legendary Mr. Ratan Tata, the chairman emeritus Tata Sons and chairman of Tata Trust, we had the privilege of getting a glimpse of his early life, inspiration, experiments, and the leaps of faith that he undertook, which kind of redefined the destiny of Tata Group. Taking this iconic journey forward, our conversation will focus on his vision, the bold choices that he made, his leadership, the institution building, and his overall impact to the world. On behalf of Central Strategic Mindset, let me welcome Mr. Ratan Tata once again for another eclectic, exciting, and thought provoking conversation. Thank you, Mr. Tata, for gracing us with your presence and inspiring the world with your thoughts. Welcome to the Journey of Legends. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. Nice to be back.
I believe you had the first shot of vaccine. How are you doing, sir?
That is quite painless and uh, nothing to be afraid of. I did have some reactions.
Hmm.
Uh, Felt a little like I was coming down with the flu.
Okay.
Uh, Sort of under the weather, but no real difference. Body ache, little bit went away in a day.
Thank you. I wish you good luck for your second dose whenever it's due, and I pray that nothing happens and you're going to be absolutely all right.
Yeah, I'm sure I will be. I think I would like to sort of make a statement that I think we owe it to the general environment to take a vaccine shot and not defer it or delay it. I think the sooner we win over this pandemic, the the better we will be in terms of our health, the deaths, and the infections in the country.
And coming from you, it's like a spirit of human being, how to face the braves with head on, and that's really inspiring. Thank you for doing and inspiring the world.
Yeah.
Let me begin with today's conversation. No conversation with Mr. Ratan Tata would be complete without reference to the wonderful bond that you shared with Mr. JRD. What was his influence? And would you be happy to share some of those behind the scenes mentoring conversations that shaped your destiny in the times to come?
Well, Mr. J.I.D. Tata was, uh, for all intents and purposes, my main mentor uh, throughout certainly throughout the 20 last years of his life. Um, he had Jay, as everybody referred to him, had a an ability to zero in on the issues. At that particular point in time, it was rather distressing because you'd work very hard to give him a detailed note on something he wanted. You did this and with some degree of pride. And he'd glance at the note and he'd say, no, 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 this is not what you missed the point here and here and here. And you'd feel offended that he demolished your thought process, your objectives, the manner in which you wrote it. And then you go out and get over your anger and distress. and then sheepishly you have to tell yourself he was quite right.
Hmm.
Um, Other times he'd go out of his way to say, "This is I really liked what you put up. I think you should develop this further or whatever." Apart from those two extremes, he was a terrific mentor. He always had time for you. He always would sit down and listen, not interrupt you when you were making your case to him. And very often, he'd only interrupt you to ask you something for clarification. So he was many things merged into one. He gave you the freedom to operate. He also tied you up sometimes, almost on a handcuff basis, on not doing something that he had. Uh, I'll give you one not so clear instance.
Sure.
When I took over uh, as chairman of Tata Industries, I tried to set up uh, issue-wise uh, committees. So not issue-wise, company-wise or group-wise.
Yes.
So we created a materials committee, an automotive committee, uh, steel committee, etc., and had the key people of that company, Tata Steel or Tata Motors or whatever,
Yes.
to sit and engage themselves in where to go, what to bring to the table, what was our weakness, etc. So we set up these committees. I made the greatest mistake in not inviting Jay to be on those committees, thinking that he wouldn't have the time. He proceeded to demolish those committees. If there was a committee meeting and he had to meet A or B or C,
Yes.
he didn't. I mean, he was very sure when he asked for somebody to come, which would be immediate, that he was dismantling that committee because it couldn't meet without everyone being there. So he had his own devilish kind of ability to dismiss something if he didn't like it.
Thank you. Sometimes these leaders have the razor sharp precision vision to home on to, and others may feel unexpressed. I think there's an opportunity to learn for both the parties. What could the leaders who do like this, or what you being at the recipient side, how did you deal with that?
I actually, on that particular thing, um, I had gone to. I forgot to mention that I went to him afterwards and said, "Look, you're purposely dismantling the meetings when they're being held. Is there any reason?" And he said, "Yes, you didn't invite me to be on it." Uh, so those kinds of frank discussions enabled us to say, "My goodness, I really apologize, and we'd correct that in terms of moving on. In this particular case, it was he would sit and listen to some of the outcomes of these meetings. He didn't want to get involved in, was he the chairman, was, is, and and we'd move on. But he had to have that offer.
Okay, thank you. Amidst influences of various leaders and personalities that you happen to work with, how did you find your own leadership style, something that you can call of your own?
Under Jay, there was a particular style of operation. It revolved a great deal around the human human being.
Yes.
I was more of a numbers person, so there was a change in style. In that uh, there was a more number based, issue based uh, style of management, whereas his was the more human style. I I find it difficult to actually answer your question meaningfully because I think the style that emerged, I couldn't identify where it emerged and where it ended.
Yeah. Leadership is always a work in progress. We are internally calibrating our own approach. We also modeling something that we see around. I would be keen to know that how did you go about finding your feet, face the old guard, and lay down the foundation for a transformation that put the Tata Group on a global map?
Well, I actually, well, the issues before me were what did I want to achieve or what did I want to do? I wanted to have goal setting. Jay didn't do this very much. The achievements that Jay and the group at that time had were achievements that of um, volume or style or entry that were intuitive. My time it was more let's set that goal, let's go for it, measure oneself against that. Never do what we've been doing for years, which was to measure ourselves against our own past history. That was, a sort of rolling, rolling thing, which you never looked at what was happening in that business area, other than past history. And you have all your management information as X% from last year or something. So you were no longer looking at what you could do, but what you did or did not do compared to the past. There's there's scope for each of those styles, somehow bring it into focus. I just like to dwell on that
Sure.
just once more. The one thing I took away from the Harvard Business School when I came out of that program was an underlying methodology or process where you put yourself in the shoes of the other person.
Hmm.
If there was any one issue that has helped me uh, over the years, it is that one issue that when you were dealing with conversing with, debating with, disagreeing with another person, you mentally step into his shoes and look at the issue from his standpoint. It doesn't seem like a big issue, but it is enormous in terms of its value. It disarms, it integrates you with what you want to do, what the other guy would like to do. It helps defer disagreement. So that one issue has been something that I have treasured, if you might.
Thank you. That sounds like empathy because everyone has a logic or his own frame of reference. And to be able to temporarily park your own logic and see things from other side, that's empathy. You spoke about numbers and intuitiveness or intuition. I would love to hear from you. The idea of nano, was it intuitive or how it came? There are many stories, but today we would love to hear from you that how did you chance upon that idea?
Well, the the nano sort of emerged as something that you visually saw around you, namely, you saw a family, the kid standing in front of the father, the mother sitting uh, side saddled, if you might, legs out one side, the kid in the mother's arms. And this was a family of 4 or 5 on a scooter. And I thought, my God, this is such an unsafe thing. If she slips, or I think there'll be a tremendous catastrophe here. And I happened to see one such, fortunately not a catastrophe, but the family thrown off because of the sliding in the rain. And fortunately, no one being hurt. This led me to sit and doodle how to make a scooter safe.
Very nice.
And, was it with outrigger wheels? Was it with a frame around it to secure the passengers? And in many ways, to me, those moments were very enjoyable, to be able to refresh your thinking of what should be safe. It's somewhat interesting now when you travel overseas, you see uh, an, a machine that exists in Europe, which is a scooter but with 3 wheels instead of
Yes.
2, and you can get off the thing and it stands still. You don't have it tipping to one side or another. And so what emerged was that evolution of all those different options. And somewhere in the process, you said you didn't want a half car. If we're going to something that's going to give the family affordable transport through rain and weather and so on, you need a car. The first thoughts on Nano were a car at a very low price with curtains instead of doors, um, that would get the family from one place to another. But there was an urge that this not be considered a makeshift or a special uh, thing for the underprivileged. And in fact, we made that mistake down the line in the marketing group of Tata Motors to work this to be the the country's cheapest automobile. We aired badly in that area because it was meant to be an affordable family transport. It was never meant to be a substandard, uh, cheap issue. It was meant to be a trendy way to travel with, within the safety of an entity. And what we therefore failed to do is to carry on its image of being the trendy new car. And we failed in our endeavor to continue upending that car into something that was quite acceptable. Instead, we lost it by claiming that it was the cheapest car because it added a bit of
Image.
um, absolutely.
Yeah. But whatever may have been the case, I think it put the group on a global arena and people love the bold foray. And the entire idea of picking up an incident in the real world and doing something about itself is really commendable. Moving on, I'd like to ask you a question. What was that one impossible in your life that you made it possible, according to you?
I I don't know that I can identify uh, something in the nature of what you ask because there were many areas that seemed impossible.
One thing that you fondly consider it's very important among the many.
Well, if I'm now coming off the wall, uh, the strategic plan I developed sitting in the hospital while my mother was ill gave us a plan of going into new areas, into the new generation products, IT, digital technology, passenger cars, for example. We only had commercial vehicles before, and it spelled out the image of a new Tata group. And some of those became projects and businesses, not in my time, following my time. Uh, we talked about some of these issues which today are considered to be worthwhile evolutionary issues for, let's say, Tata Global Beverages
Yes.
or Tata Motors in passenger cars or process control with Honeywell. And there are a few others where the group didn't openly accept the changes that were conceived of or thought of, but inevitably it happened. And so you could sit back and say, well, in a way, I planted the seed
And they flourished.
and it happened. They haven't flourished as yet.
Yeah.
One hopes they will. But somewhere along the line, one got the strength or the courage to move into that unknown area.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Let me take you to the memory lane. In 1999, when the group was contemplating to sell its passenger car business to Ford, Things did not go as expected, and that meeting in Detroit was not the best one would like to remember, especially when someone made a remark, "You do not know anything about passenger cars. Why did you start the car division at all?" Tell us what was going on in your mind in that 90 minutes flight back, and how did you deal with that apparent experience?
Well, it wasn't quite the way you described it.
Okay.
For example, we we never were looking at selling to Ford. It was somewhat the other way around. Ford had an operation in India where they were looking at a low cost entry to the local Indian market. And they came to us saying, "We find you are able to get prices that we can't get. Can we work together uh, to operate on the purchasing parts in a manner that we have a lower cost intake?" That meeting did not go well because my stand at the meeting was, uh, what do we do with the low cost part? They said we put it into our vehicle, and I said, but then what's in it for us?
Yes.
And they said, well, we have a greater volume, we could do things together, but there was never any talk of working together, so we dropped it. Uh, and uh, we did not pursue that. They came back, as a matter of fact, some years later with a similar proposal, different people, the similar kind of proposal. Can we increase the volumes? Can we do things together that would enable us to bring the costs down? But it wasn't truly a cooperative venture. It was, it's best for me. Can you help me? We can do something together. And we chose not to. Yeah, you had a second part to that question.
So, what you said, contrary to that, the story is different, and but this is something
Ah,
which really
yeah,
uh, makes sense. And my second part of the question was, how did you deal with that? And
yeah,
the seeds of JLR acquisition, do they have linkage, or how did that happen?
yeah. Let me, it's coming back to me now. Your question was also that people said that you didn't know anything about
Yes.
cars, and that was not Ford, that was JLR.
All right.
Uh, when we took over the company, there was a lot of conjecture on the part of the employees. So what are Tata going to do? They don't have any passenger cars. They haven't been in that business. So what are they going to do at JLR? Ford has been there for eight years and have failed to make a success of the passenger car, which was more than what we saw. It was Jaguar, Land Rover, um, I believe Volvo. There were five, Aston Martin. There were five cars uh, that Ford had bought over and put into what became, I think, a prestige group or so. And we took JLR out of that, didn't take Aston Martin and the others. So the first meeting I had with the staff of JLR was a town hall meeting, basically getting to know each other. And there were a lot of rumors going around at that time that Tatas were taking this to produce real estate for themselves or uh, have a um tandoori chicken franchise in different places because they were sitting on large real estate
Yes.
tracts. Um, and there were a lot of rumors around that Tatas are not really interested in the passenger car area. And this was just a takeover of this to go into other areas. Um, and that was the only time that I can recall somebody saying, well, you don't know passenger cars. What are you going to do? Are you going to shift everything to India?
Hmm.
Uh, are you going to go into new businesses on the land that we have? And the only thing I could say is no, our intention is to build these two brands back into the glory that they enjoyed before. So can we do it shoulder to shoulder? Because I think if we do it together, we can achieve it. So I think both the things happen, but they happen differently from what you you mentioned.
You know, couple of minutes ago, you were saying that you're more of a number guy and J was humanity. But I think in this example, you approach this through humanity, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, one did not meet with one that one uh, dropped the humanities and only looked at numbers.
Yeah.
I would say that I brought concern on the numbers, which Jay did not. Jay didn't. It wasn't that he was deficient in that. It was a seller's market in those days. I still remember Mr. Talaulekar, who was the managing director of Telco at that time. Uh, for trucks, they sat down and made a plan. If you asked what what was the plan, he said how to maximize production because everything we make we can sell. So there was a lot of this is what we have for you, and you have to see this as the market opportunity. That's all. That was the box in which it was. It didn't encourage you to look outside the box. Didn't encourage you to look at new things. Uh, and you had to gain the confidence of the workforce
Yes.
in terms of what you. Without that, the numbers would have meant nothing.
One of the things which somehow I picked up and I believe in, decisions are always made in heart and rationalized in mind. What is your view on this statement?
I don't think it's possible to say it's right or wrong. I think again it's an issue of how the conflict develops or the problem develops.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when I say this statement and they say, no, it's not true. And then I often say, okay, how did you decide to marry? Did you go by numbers or rationalization? Or you first liked it in heart? So then they kind of think it differently.
Well, I think first and the only part of this that I can feel like can add a reasonable response to is you do what you believe has been the right the right thing. You do it with compassion, you do it with sincerity, and you share the results with your partner. In this case, maybe the workforce, it may be marketing, it may be a distant market per se. And you do this in a manner that you're able to defend.
I couldn't agree more. As the former chairman of Tata Sons, what have been those really watershed moments that brought you the greatest joy or satisfaction? What kind of emotions engulf you, whether it's TCS IPO or JLR and Chorus? Which one comes to your mind on top of the recall?
Well, JLR, the turnover of JLR uh, would have been one such thing that would follow in in the situation that we had, where we bought JLR for I think 1.6 billion US dollars, and we had to pump in more than that because the economies in Europe and the UK collapsed. And that was a sheer leap of faith that would come about, be able to return to profitability. What did happen is we pumped the money in, the market turned around, the product stood for it, and the workforce stood with us. And we were able to not only recoup the investment we made, but had the enjoyment of seeing the brand being uh, returned to its glory. In one sense, that ended up the way you just described it, as an issue.
Thank you. You've done so many things in life. You've been in different roles. I'm going to ask a different kind of question. If you were to see yourself as a teacher, what would you love to teach?
Don't know. And uh, the reason for that is that so often you have gone into an area that you either have felt weak in, or you feel is distasteful, and yet out of that has emerged a very uh, rich business experience. So one shouldn't
Hmm.
uh, consider your first thought to be the right way to be. Or if I had the nano to do over again,
Hmm.
I would never go down the route of being the cheapest car, but instead put value into the car at an affordable price. It's a formula that worked very well for Hyundai and Kia, the Korean car
Yes.
manufacturers. They were able to create cars rich in content, electric windows, automatic transmissions in cars that had a value much below ones that are able to sell with so many options.
Yes.
So um, I think there's always a means of of reevaluating what you've done and saying, is there a better way to do it? And if there is, can you be courageous enough to say I was wrong, and here's the product that we believe the market wants?
Oh, you mentioned about Kia, and I love their Kia Carnival, and I'm in trying to negotiate with my wife to allow me to buy. It's a beautiful salon. I really love that.
Yeah.
Okay. You are also an icon for entrepreneurs. What is it, your message to entrepreneurs in order to scale their business from where they start to really make it big? What are a couple of thoughts you'd like to share with them?
There's actually nothing I'd like to share with them. I think I've been asked this question before, and there the issue is I have, in my little personal foray into startups, have come to conclude that you can be so wrong in your enthusiasm about this startup versus another, and you find the startup that you got excited over uh, fails badly in the market, and in fact, something you consider to be mediocre turns out to be a real winner in the market. And really, I have come to conclude that I had draw the greatest amount of um foresight, etc., into having talks with the founders.
Thank
What
you.
are the founders' views on the business they're in? Is it just to um, sell out to a bigger company? Is it that are really building this into an enterprise that would stand on its own? And the sincerity of the founders, in my view, is the gauge of the success or weakness of the company.
Great points. I think there's a lot of wisdom rooted in that. Mr. Tata, what is the unfinished agenda for you?
I guess, I guess the one is to be facetious, to be able to stay alive with uh, a reasonable mental acuity. But seriously, uh, to be concerned about the quality of life of the people that you are involved with. Not, and by that I mean not to exploit your partners, um, your competitors, even, but to do something that you can go home at night and say, I did the right thing. I did it at my cost, but it was for the right reasons. And I think that would be a nice way to end your life.
Thank you for sharing that, and it's so inspiring. You know, time flies when one is listening to you because so much of passion, so many stories, and I'm sure people will find this conversation extremely enriching and learning oriented.
I've enjoyed being on this question answer issue. Um, and if I have added value, I'm pleased. If I have not, that's fine too, because that's what you got.
For a change, that's not for you to decide. I'm going to decide because this conversation is really valuable. It's really enriching. There's without doubt. Thank you very much, Mr. Tata. Firstly, we'd like to wish you great health with the right mental alertness that you are seeking for so that your ideas, your efforts can continue to inspire the world as long as possible.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.